don't have a handheld microphone for this room, unfortunately. Matter of fact, let's do, we got down here, Noah's idea. I'm looking.
While you're looking at me, Brother Mark, let's give him a hand for coming to join us today. All right. While you wait for other people, if we could have Dr. Winbush, he missed his
Rose, I got this.
You got this?
I got this, Rose. I got this. So we got. So what we're going to do is, while also I'm going to have folks introduce themselves, and then I'm going to also try to figure out this thing down here and see if I can plug in the XLR, try to get some kind of handheld down here. I'm going to try to figure that out. But we're going to do this. So we want you to tell everybody your name, your title. We want you to project so everybody obviously can be able to hear you and know exactly who you are. And so we'll start. You just walked in on my sign. You go ahead and start.
My name is Mysonne. I work for Justice League NYC. I also work with Tamika, Mallory. Whatever she tells me to do, I do. Yep. I'm a hip-hop artist and an activist.
And my name is Jeribu Hill. I'm a human rights defender and civil rights lawyer and part-time judge in Mississippi in the Delta. And I'm also a cultural artist, singer, and actress.
My name is Johan Semacubela. I'm an economic development advisor as well as educational justice advocate. I'm also the youngest son of civil rights activist Dick Grace.
I'm Ray Winbush. I teach at Morgan State University, about 4 miles from where Freddie Gray was.
My name is Jessica Barker. I'm co-coordinator for Lift Our Vote 2020. I also am special assistant to Ms. Fire Rose Sanders, and I also am president of New South Madison County Chapter.
Good afternoon, everyone. My name is Jashira Bolden, and I'm a 2019 Miss Black Illinois USA.
Hey, y'all. My name is Ayana Gregory. I'm a performing artist, activist, and educator, and the youngest daughter of Lillian and Dick.
All right. So now everybody introduced themselves. Okay. Well, I couldn't see everybody down there.
Hello, everyone. My name is April Cadell. I am a longtime member and currently a camp counselor for 21st Century Youth Leadership Movement, and I'm also a doctoral candidate at the University of Alabama.
Hello, everyone. My name is Tamika Mallory. I do a whole lot of stuff. I just like to tell people I work for Roland because I do whatever he tells me.
Yeah.
And I am co-president of the Women's March, 5 million women and allies in 2017, and we've been million strong since then. And I'm just happy to be here today.
All right. So here's the deal. I don't have to throw questions out to each individual person, so we want to have this a free-flowing conversation. So you can jump in, and folks start stepping over each other. I'll interject and sort of shut that down so people can actually hear each person speaking. But I'm going to throw this out first. Here we obviously are in Selma. And what's interesting about when we have these conversations about Black freedom movement, there's this assumption that it was kumbaya, everybody got along, there were these wonderful meetings where there was complete consensus and there was total unity, and that's a flat-out lie. You had SNCC, Student Nonviolent Coordinating Committee, who would mock Dr. King by calling him the Lord. Harry Belafonte talked about a meeting in his apartment in New York where literally one of the SNCC folks cussed them out and walked out of the room, and they were all dealing with that. So just anyone can jump out again that has existed between folks who are young and folks who are older, but the point at the end of the day was still, how do you move ahead? So I'm curious, and anyone can throw out your own example of how you had to grapple with that young versus old, or new head versus old school, and how you dealt with it. Anybody go ahead.
I can go. So, because I guess I live it every day. I am a movement baby, a civil rights baby. My parents were two of Reverend Al Sharpton's founding members. So I worked for Reverend Sharpton for 14 years, but the organization is almost 30 years old. I'm not shielded anymore. Let's put it that way. I have to, deal with head on all that goes along with speaking truth to power and being a leader in your own right. And we don't always find that the leaders that are before us even support or are even willing to sort of step into the fire with you. And I think that has been a challenge. It hasn't been so much for Reverend Sharpton, but in general, you find that when you're sort of coming into your own, you have to really step into it. There's no safety net, if you will, that, once the system begins to challenge you, that you're able to hide behind anything. There is not that. Each generation is responsible for stepping up and standing up in your own right, in your own time, in your own boldness, and sometimes that can be extremely painful. And I think we do look for those safety nets, but they're not there, such as they were not there during the time that Reverend Jackson and Reverend Sharpton and others came along. So I think if I could, say to any young person is, first of all, you have to decide if that's what you want, because sure enough, if you choose to speak up and to stand in your power, you are going to face a movement of people who are well-resourced and well-researched that will come after you. And you have to be prepared to take that on. And the other side is that you can't really look around and expect, although we should. And I know when people like Fire Rose and others, and Mark Thompson, who's here, who would like to see, he probably doesn't want to think that he's old, but he certainly is.
Oh, he old.
He certainly is a mentor to me, but not enough of our leaders are going to be there, either because they're not alive or bought and sold, or unwilling to take a continuous beating that they know what it feels like, and a lot of times they sort of leave you out there on your own, and it's a painful space to be in. And I think the last thing I would say is that yet and still, even though it's painful, even though we want to point fingers, at the end of the day, it's important for us to feel the licking. It's important for us to take it, because without that, you can never really be strong enough to say that you are a leader of the people who take a licking every day. Our people are constantly under attack. So if you are a leader who is not able to deal with the controversy that comes along with it, then you're not really prepared for leadership. So, it's a painful space, but it's also a very rewarding space, because when you come over to the other side, you come over stronger than you were before. And people just need to get ready for that, because it's coming your way. Everybody all down this path, yeah?
Anybody else? Go ahead. Go ahead.
To the elders in the room, we need you as storytellers.
Yeah.
We shouldn't have children who believe that Harriet Tubman and Martin Luther King were born at the same time. That's our fault. So when you talk about this intergenerational gap, and we see it, we work with young people every day around the country and around the world, and the gap has grown wider. And in my opinion, I think that so many of our elders, because of what they didn't have, they were racing to give us everything they didn't have, but many forgot to give them what they did have. Yeah. So the sense of entitlement that some of our children have is our fault. And what I find is, I say turn off the TV, you be the movie. We have an opportunity to tell our stories, because the larger conversation is that there's a planetary transformation and shift that's happening right now. And those of us who are a part of the movement, directly or indirectly, this is such a powerful opportunity for us, because there's a healing, there's an underground healing movement that is about to become above ground. And we're sitting right here making history, because we're in the best of times and the worst of times, and we right on time. And we're built for it. If we're still standing, we're built for it. We've never seen some of the things that we're seeing right now. We've never seen in our lifetime. I'm not an elder. I'm in my late 40s. But so.
Your ass an elder.
Okay, I'll take it. I'll take it.
Why is it
I'll take it.
Hold on, let down the line. We will start you, my son. Everybody gonna get an age on this panel. So women too. So we can go ahead and be straight. I'm 50. My son, 41.
I don't want to say.
Girl, come on.
I'll let you guess.
You better go ahead and get that age.
Okay, I don't mind. April 6th, I will be 70.
That's what I'm saying.
On April 6th of this year.
Took us a while to get it out.
45.
7.
We ain't hear you.
34.
All right.
19.
47.
29.
I'm 38.
All right. So I want us to do that. So we got folks who are again in let's see, under 20. And we got anybody in the 20s. Anybody in the 20s? Okay. We got the 30s. We got the 40s.
And the forever
We
young.
skipped the 50s and the 60s, and we at the 70s. So now we straight. Now we straight with everybody. So don't be fronting like I'm not an elder. Go ahead and finish down. Go ahead.
So when she finished.
She gonna finish, and I'm gonna come back down. Go ahead. Go ahead.
So I just want, speaking about this generational piece, when I say we've never seen what we're seeing right now in my lifetime, I've never seen this. And what I'm speaking of is, for instance, so I traveled the country speaking to young people, and I was down at, Bernice King brought me down to the King Center to do my play, Daughter of the Struggle, which is about growing up as a child of the movement. So there were 6th, 7th, and 8th graders. And I asked the question, because there were hundreds of them, and there were elders in the theater as well, and I asked them, I said, if you or anyone your age, or if you know anyone your age who's considered committing suicide, raise your hand. 80% of the hands went up. And most of the elders almost passed out. And I knew that the reality was what it was, but I needed the elders to see that. And part of the gap certainly has been from the outside in, all of the things that have systematically been put in place to widen this gap in our communities. But also, you know, our choice, consciously or unconsciously, to stop telling our story. I can't tell you how important I believe the storytelling tradition is for me. It is very spiritual. It is very powerful. And there's something in our community that has always been passed down, from one generation to the next, from spirit to spirit. And so as we move into this age of Aquarius, as the women have begun to rise, and I look at the black man and the black woman, and specifically the black woman, she is literally the mother of humanity. And so we literally are the parents of humanity, and we are responsible. And black women, we are up for it. We have always been up for it. And what I would say is that to the black woman in the room, is that we have an opportunity to take care of ourselves, because we have always taken care of everybody else first, which has been part of what the imbalance has been.
That's right.
And so I would like to say that, you know, to have you, Sister Tamika, doing what you do, with the kind of commitment. If there's anybody been built for it in this generation, it's you. And I know that it's not just about one individual, but sister, you are powerful. Yes. And because you have young people's attention, and she has elders' attention, so you are a connector. You are a connector sent from the ancestors.
You know what? I want to pick up on that, and I know we're going to come right here. I want you to integrate your stories in the comment, but I do want to pick up on that, and again, the idea of a connector. Because in every generation, you have individuals who have relationships with people who are their age or younger, and then folks older, and you have to have those connectors as well. I'm curious, Ray, with your life history, how have you operated as that connector, whether at this age or younger, and how did you have to deal with that? And all the folks here, no matter what your age is, when I'm saying connector, you might be in a room 15 years old, but the reality is you may be dealing with people who are 25 or 30, and and then folks who are 10 and 12. So connector doesn't mean, oh, I'm only connected when I get older. No, a connector can be at any age when you're involved in things like this here. Ray, go ahead, and then Ray, just give your story in the first question. Go ahead.
Well, you know, I've been fortunate because this is my 46th year of teaching young people at the university level. So I know everything about young people because they always share it with me. And one of the things that, you know, at Morgan State where I teach now, and even when I was at Fisk before that, is that a lot of students aren't aware of their history. And I think a connector for all of us is an understanding of history. This is a true story. About 2 months ago, I was teaching a class at Morgan State, Theories of Personality, and I kind of casually said Alice Walker, and a student in the class said, Dr. Winbush, who's Alice Walker? And so I said, you know, I pointed to other students and said, look, tell her who Alice Walker is. And nobody knew. Then I said the color purple. Oh yeah. So there was a disconnect between the movie of The Color Purple and who Alice Walker was. Mm-hmm. So I think history is our best teacher. I was a little disappointed when Ferguson was going down that I heard, I forget the poet's name, and he said, this is not your grandparents' civil rights movement. As if the only thing we were doing, like you said, Roland, was singing We Shall Overcome. I said, what about the Black Panthers, Republic of New Africa, Deacons of Defense?
But also, what about the fact that every major civil rights bill was preceded by a race riot that was started by police brutality?
Exactly. So we got to have history. We have to know more about history. All of us do. And that's the common connector that all of us have. And Tamika, I want to thank you publicly because, you know, there are a lot of elders that don't want to stand with Minister Farrakhan. And I saw several of those interviews. So there's some from my generation very scared. They don't want to, you know, they'll denounce him before they embrace him. So I just want to put that out there. I want to thank you for your strength. Right?
Go ahead.
So, I just was grabbed to be on this panel, but always glad to speak on this issue. I've had some real success as a revolutionary black woman making those connections between young revolutionary black women and young revolutionary black men, particularly in the law. Black Law Students Association, they have, for some reason, latched on to me as one of their mentors, and they brought me out, and I've spoken all across the country for different Black Law student events. And what I found inside of those events is that assumptions should never be made about where people are in terms of their development or their personal experience or their knowledge of our resistance movement. Because for every struggle that we've ever been engaged in this country and across the world, you go to South Africa, Hector Peterson was the first young black revolutionary, 13 years old, who fell in Soweto. You go to Coalition of Immokalee Workers, all of the leaders are under 25. Every struggle, every resistance movement against capitalism and U.S. imperialism in particular have been led by young people. And so we were young ones. And it's deep because sometimes in some circles you think, I've always been old, but that's not true. I started out in the movement when I was a teenager. I was a knucklehead on a historically black college campus, and I got right on that campus. I was walking down the campus yard, as we call it, and these brothers and sisters had these black armbands on. And I said, what's that about? And I told you, I'm a knucklehead, drinking cheap wine and everything. And they said, oh, sister, this is for El Hajj Malik. I said, El who? And they said, Malcolm X. I said, who? I didn't even know who Malcolm X was. And so I had to be educated. But what I learned, what I saw from that is that they were very receptive. They never condescended me. They never put me down. And so I've tried to be that same example, and I invite you, if you're interested, you don't have to be interested in the law, to come to Mississippi and work in our Fannie Lou Hamer internship program, to go door to door with us, to watch the conditions that our people suffer under and help us demand not just relief, but accountability. So I've had and continue to have amazing experiences. The shirt I'm wearing was given to me by the Law for Black Lives young people who started that movement. I saw the shirt, I said, wow, and they gave me one. So I feel forever young because I think we have to really, really steel up and shore up that part of ourselves that is young and continue to claim our youthful zeal and spirit for the movement.
Before I go to that end, raise your hand if you know who Family Lou Hamer is.
Yay.
Okay, so for the folks who didn't raise their hand, pull your phone out. Go to the, okay, yeah, no, this is a working discussion.
Okay.
I give homework to grown people and young people. So pull your phone out, go to the notes section, and I want, okay, that's not rhetorical, that's literal. Pull your phone out, and I want you to type in the name Fannie Lou Hamer, because there are going to be a lot of names and a lot of books that are going to be thrown out during this discussion. And if you don't know, I want you to be taking those notes, so when you leave here, you're going back doing the research. And so Fannie Lou Hamer, spell it for them.
F-A-N-N-I-E.
L-O-U.
L-U-H-A-M-E-R.
All right, that's the first piece of homework. Go right ahead.
Hi.
Hey.
Well, my name is Adelaide again. Good to be here. I was telling one of my fellow 21st century counselors, I was like, can you remember how many of these we've come to Bridge Crossing Jubilees? I've lost count. I think my first was when we were still in the 30th anniversaries. But some people on panel have already spoken to what I was thinking earlier when it comes to specifically my position as someone who is probably, by most people's account, still a young person. And that is like to not ever feel like I'm inventing a movement, but just continuing a movement. And so, and for one, I think it keeps you humble, and also think it gives you a sense of not being so overwhelmed. Because when you think of everything just as like you individually, or your lifetime, or even your generation, then you can become overwhelmed, but you can also become prideful. And so like when it comes to history, everything that people, we could say lovingly suggest that Black people just need to, I'm like, you tried that before. And I'm not saying we didn't succeed, but like we look at our history, Black people have been innovative and have been fighting and doing resistance movements against injustice for a very long time now, as long as they've been experiencing injustice. Because that's just the way humanity is set up. You know, the argument is that you can't hold people down, and eventually the human spirit resists against being held down. And so the idea of continuing a movement, but at the same time knowing that each person and each generation, each living group of people has something unique to their time that will contribute to the whole movement and the timeline and the people that come later. And that gives you humility as a young person. And when it comes to being a young person and working with younger people, like someone has already said, something that I think I've appreciated and I've also learned to do myself when I noticed that I was not doing as well as I would have liked is to never talk down to young people ever. And I think that sometimes we kind of like walk around the romantic ways of saying things like, oh, the young people are the future, oh, they're tomorrow, oh, it's like, okay, I like to give people specific things to do, and so one of the things I suggest is to never, you really shouldn't ever talk down to anyone, but it's very tempting.
Well, some folk have earned it.
Well, you can talk down on an idea. You can talk down like on an idea. Like that's one thing to disagree with someone's idea or opinion. But for example, like if you meet someone and you tell them like, oh, do you know about Harry Moore, right? And if they say, no, I don't know who that is, it can be tempting to say, oh, but I bet you know all the rappers right now, right? So it can be tempting to say something like that, but instead you take that opportunity to say, oh, well, I'll tell you about this person, or I suggest that you look them up, or And it goes in other ways because, like we were saying with the history, we can look down on someone for being older. Like ageism kind of goes both ways in that sense. There's like the ageism of the older generation, but there's also the ageism of youth. You know, like we also equate youth with immorality in the way we speak. It's like, oh, that's what girls do, that's what boys do, right? Like, so we don't even realize how we equate an adult making immoral decisions to them being a young person, right? So it's like we make that synonymous. And it's like, or maybe they're just doing immoral things, and you can do immoral things at any age, right? So it's just like language can be so insidious, and we don't even necessarily recognize, so it's an opportunity to learn and grow. And from my experience, especially if you have very young children, children are the ones who have the most innate sense of justice, right? Like, tell them you're going to do something and don't do it, and you'll know that they have the most innate sense of justice. But then with time, we teach them, well, here are all the exceptions to the rule when it comes to doing the right thing. These are the people you don't actually love, or these are the times when it's okay to not keep your word. And so that to me is what is important when talking to young people, because the thing is that unless you pass away in infancy, we're all going to be young people, and then maybe there are those of us who are fortunate to be elders. Right, but when it comes...
Ain't no Benjamin Buttons in here.
No, like everyone in here has been a young person. And there are those of us who will be fortunate enough to be elders. But that commonality of being a young person and valuing your voice and also staying humble and never feeling like you invented something, but you're just continuing a legacy that was laid forth so that you know it's who you are. Like, speaking out against injustice is who you are, because those are the people you come from. And you're going to influence the people after you who speak out against injustice.
I want Jessica to speak to this in terms of talking about how do you get people to understand, to pay attention to the lay of the lands. I'll use this example. After Trayvon Martin, after George Zimmerman was found not guilty, it was a Saturday. People were just, feelings were raw. And about 800 of us were on this conference call at 3 o'clock in the morning. Folks just wanted just to talk. And then the next night, there was another conference call, and it was 2,000. And a group of us started, this group, we started meeting via conference call. And they wanted to start something to harness sort of all this momentum. And we started having this call. And what happens when you get really smart people together, they start jumping 12 steps. And so we had like 3 or 4 calls. Tamika was on the call, 3 or 4 calls, and I called Angela Rye, who's also organizer. I said, we got about 3 or more of these calls left before this thing died. And she's like, what? I said, here's why. We haven't addressed why we are meeting. Everybody wants to jump to the, let's go. And so Jeff Johnson told me the story. So one of the young sisters was on the call. She's like, look, I don't know why Roland brought me this call. I wish he'd get off. And so she starts going off. And Jeff said, well, first, sister, he said, first, out of all the people on the call, which one is on a radio show heard by 8 million people? He said, number 2, out of all people on the call, which one has a TV show? Then he said, out of all people on the call, if we needed somebody right now to write a $10,000 check, who could write it right now? He said, you might want to chill saying who shouldn't be on a call and not understand what people bring to the table. Can you talk about that when you're dealing with that? And that's also older folks understanding what younger folks bring to the table, because I think a lot of times we want to write people off before we say, wait a minute, they bring value to the organization, the movement, the issue, whatever.
So I think that generationally speaking, there is a change in the type of movement and how the movements are mobilized in the communities. So you have your more traditional organizations like NAACP or Urban League or SELC, who they have been used to mobilizing in a certain manner. And what I'm finding through Lift Our Vote and trying to get that coordinated, because Lift Our Vote is about getting all of these different movements and organizations to work together in order to educate our community on voter education and civic engagement. And what I find is like the younger movements, like Tamika's movement, and Roland has a movement where he uses star power to try to mobilize those of us in the community. It looks totally different from your traditional movements. And so I think oftentimes that is where a lot of the disconnect comes in, because the older generations, they don't really understand the social media movement. They're like, you know, nobody, why are you on social media? Like, you know, and so they don't understand. So I think right now, because we're in a transitional time in the civil rights movements, and we're in a time where the generational gap is kind of changing, I think that it's very important that the younger people work just as hard with the older people as we're asking them to work with us, because there's a lot that we don't understand from them and they also don't understand from us. And I think it's all about having that conversation. And you're right, Roland, because these calls that we have every week, sometimes it's like bump your head on a table, nobody's getting anything done because everybody is like the superstar, you know. But I think that when we actually take a step back and start listening to one another, that we can realize that regardless of age, there's something that can be learned, because everyone does bring something to that table.
Well, my son, you had to deal with that as well. Someone who's in music, and you hear all the time, new school, old school, we will about issues, y'all about money, and it's all this sort of stuff. And what often gets lost in that is if you don't take the time to raise point, you don't take the time to actually educate somebody and not assume they figured it out, you're missing a huge opportunity for two groups to come together and say, I mean, I sort of look at when Jay-Z and Harry Belafonte had issues, and Jay-Z made his point, and Harry Belafonte made his point, and then when they had a conversation, it was, okay, now how we can move forward. And that was valuable to the conversation of social justice.
I think that's the reason why I got involved with the movement, because I realized there was a disconnect. I realized that the culture of hip hop was not connected properly to the civil rights movement when it should be, because it all came up with the movement, the music of hip hop represents our struggle. And I think that as we get older, we forget that we were young. I think that we forget that we went through the exact same things, and we hold these kids to a higher standard than we held ourselves to. We expect them to know what we know now, when they don't, they're not supposed to know, and we're supposed to know what they're going through. So it's our job to connect to these kids, because we've been 15 and 14. And when I got in the movement, I started to get involved. And the way I deal with young people is, I think of, when I was 13, what would you have had to say to me to connect to me? I don't think of, because I know when you come to me as an older person telling me what I'm saying is wrong, what I'm thinking doesn't make sense, then you immediately lost me. So when we start to connect with these kids and understand that leadership is not something that's given to you, it's something that you earn. So when you're speaking to a younger leader who is a leader amongst his peers, and you speak down to him, or you make him feel as if his opinion doesn't matter, that's why when you had these movements, there was different ideology. Everybody has a different ideology, but we all trying to get to the same place. So we have to say to ourselves, okay, you might have your method, and we all have the same moral compass. We all called them kids in Ferguson thugs,
That's
and
right.
our elders, the people that we looked up to, looked down upon us. So at that point, we had to separate ourselves. So when you realize, when you continue to see that happen, when you continue to see these older civil rights people that we followed in the tradition that we thought that y'all did, when we go back to the radical days, before you became the people with the suits, when you were just out there with the hoods on and all that, when we start exercising that, and then you look down upon us because you've reached a certain status, then you lose us. And the reality is you're supposed to identify with us, because you say, I know exactly what that was, because I was 16. As a 16 and a 20-year-old, I've never been 40 and 50. As a 50-year-old, you've been my age. So it's the onus is all on you to make that connection. As you, we need that guidance. We need that guidance. We need that support. We need to understand that you're teaching us within our ignorance and not trying to point out and down us because of our ignorance.
Before I go to Alex, we haven't spoken yet. Again, understand, study. If you go to YouTube, you are not going to find videos of Dr. King tearing down Malcolm X or Stokely Carmichael. Let me repeat that. Repeat that.
Right.
Dr. King was deliberate in never giving mainstream media what they desired.
That's right.
He had major philosophical issues with Malcolm X attacks in the Nation of Islam against black preachers. But he never gave mainstream media what they wanted was the soundbite of MLK attacking Malcolm X or attacking someone else. And so that should be a lesson to a lot of folks today. When you get a microphone put in your face, you might resist criticizing this leader or that leader. King saved those disagreements for private discussions. They were not public. I want to go, the sister with the crown, Miss Black, Illinois. She was like, you want to meet me? I was like, yeah, you. Yeah, dude. And then I'm coming here Christian. Go ahead.
Yes. As an African American youth in this society nowadays, it is extremely important that instead of our elders knocking us down, that you build us up. I tell any youth that I come in contact with, in order to be a great leader, you have to be a fantastic follower. You know, if we're looking at our elders that are telling us, you know, I don't understand why you're playing the game. I don't understand why you're on your cell phones every day. That is our way of communicating and getting stuff across. You know, back in your day, I tell everybody, if you had had those same options, just imagine what you would have done with social media. Just imagine what you would have done with cell phones. So instead of saying, you know, you're on your phone every day, say, okay, how can you get a message across on your phone? Instead of texting everybody saying, okay, what are you doing? Want to go to the movie? Say, how can you advance that? Connect with us and get on our level and understand how we act as youth in the community. You know, it's extremely important that you guys understand that we're not in the same century that you guys grew up in, but we are capable of being able to continue to lead and be the leaders of tomorrow. So instead of knocking us down, build us up, and that's all that we ask. You know, if we have, it kind of comes off bad when we're at home and our families are knocking us down, and we get to school and you say, like, a teacher is building us up. That feels bad that an outsider has to be the person that builds us up. Why can't it be our parents? Why can't it be our grandparents, our cousins, our sisters? You know, stop trying to find the bad in us and find the good in us, okay? So.
Well, what happened with my nieces and nephews, I know how to work the phone better than they do. So they go, Uncle Roro, I got a problem with the phone. I'm like, yeah. So that is reversed in my household. You think being sarcastic, girl? Ask my niece's Chloe. She'll tell you. I fix all their phones. Plus, I bought the phone. I bet they better be.
So, when we have this conversation about intergenerational dialogue, and it's important to know that while history constantly repeats itself, and there are things that we're doing now that we've seen before, there are also some major differences, right? And we've got to use our understanding of where we are now in this dialogue. First and foremost, we talk about an age gap. When I was, many of you young people's age, when I was 10, the idea of 45, as old as I am now, seemed ancient, right? People are living longer now than they did before. So the intergenerational gap, when we talk about young people, there's not a single person on here who's in middle school on this panel. There's some of y'all out here who are in middle school and elementary school. So when we talk about bridging this gulf, we've got to take that knowledge into account. In addition to being the father of 5 children, I've also I started and ran a public charter school on the campus of Howard University for 12 years.
The only HBCU with a charter school in America.
Absolutely, absolutely. And we were the leading charter middle school in DC for all of those 12 years. But what I learned and what I had to challenge myself was when we talked about leadership, because as a child of the movement and somebody who literally sat at the footsteps of my father, drinking in his knowledge, I realized, and as somebody who's traveled across, not only looked here, but across around the world, and you talked about this, Roland, as far as our understanding of history, we have a very romanticized and Cliff Notes version of history. Most folks involved during the civil rights movement were doing the same thing y'all trying to do now. Take care of their families, enjoy themselves, and live a good life. Leadership is an anomaly, is a premium. Same thing I have, my extended family in South Africa, that's where my name Makubela comes from. We have this idea of the apartheid movement that everybody was on the front line with Steve Biko and Mandela. No, most folks were trying to live their lives. So when we talk about that connection, what those of us that are in older generations and elders in a position of leadership need to do is find the leadership amongst the young people, okay? Because here's the deal, here's the reality, and this is something that I learned the hard way as a parent and as a school leader. Elders, older folks here, there is something that exists that is different today than when you look at it. Yes, there always was a difference between old and young, but there are times in history where we have a major shift. The invention of electricity was a major shift. Right here, this right here, your baby child is exposed to everything in recorded, documented human history. They are dealing with things we can't even begin to have thought of that we would have had to have dealt with, not at 20 years old, not at 15 years old, at 8 years old.
Our baby picture was only at the high school graduation party. That was out today.
That's right. And let me tell you this. There are things that I would hear, and we said it within the older generations all the time. And some of these young folks on the panel talked about it. Oh, young people today don't this, that, whatever. Anytime we had a problem at the middle school with the child, and I'm talking the most extreme situations, that problem made 1,000% sense when the second their parent walked in the door. Okay? We talk about young folks on their phone, right? But how many parents use this as a babysitter? Right? The studies that have come out from the American Association of Pediatrics about the impact that this has on our children. But who's giving it to them? We are. Okay? When we look and we're talking about understanding what this is and how this has shifted the dialogue, we have to employ those ambassadors. And those ambassadors are our youth leaders who want to sit at the footsteps. Because what we also found at the middle school, right, is oftentimes those folks who we're lifting up and praising up, who are doing what we're calling the right thing, they're not getting any of the accolades of their peers. And those times that those who are getting the accolades of their peers are often those kids who are the most disruptive. We've got to cross-pollinate those groups together because I've got to look at that young brother and sister who is a natural leader amongst his peers and train him for leadership. There are conversations I'm not going to be able to have with a 5-year-old, with a 15-year-old, even with some 20-year-olds. But these folks here, these young people here, who have been identified as leaders amongst their peers, they can have those dialogues. So, and let me just say this in closing. When we have these conversations and we have these pieces where we come together, we've got to have, even outside, and we know this, and we will say, even outside of the mass meetings, we've got to have smaller sessions where we're training and raising people up, right? Because all the work, and the majority of the work, isn't done in a mass setting. We've got to have these opportunities where we're raising folks up in what leadership looks like and what we're able to do. So I can say to you, so it's not that, hey, I'm not bashing you about being on your phone, but what I can let you know is the truth is, what you think you're really controlling, you're not even controlling, right? But if I just say that across the board, oh, you know, put the phone down, put it away, I've immediately turned off. And our dialogue and our ability to communicate has been shut down. But when we're able to work individually with those folks who have that leadership skill and have them deliver the message, I'm going to tell you right now, I know that even within my own kids, right, that Offset can deliver a message more powerful and impactful in 5 minutes than I could in a whole lesson. We saw that as we would bring these people into our school.
But I want to pick it right there. I want to pick it right there. And so when Dr. King went to the west side of Chicago to live in one of those slum apartments, the first night he moved in, he literally was sitting with gang members for 5 to 6 hours, listening to them and getting them to understand the role that they played when it came to having peace on the west side. So, how do we, and I know my son and Tamika can speak to this, but anybody else can as well, how do we, though, have those conversations with influencers of people today? And Offset, I talked about Jay-Z and Harry Belafonte, there's so many others. How do we have those discussions, whether they are rappers or entertainers or not, to get them to realize that influence and how a small shift this way could actually, they can use it for good in a different way? Anybody speak to that?
I think.
I was just going to say that I don't know the how. I mentioned that, Mark, when you weren't in the room, I talked
And I only meant the rappers, but there's somebody in the high school or
Right.
junior high school who has influence and they're not necessarily caring about issues. And so somebody can have the ability to go to them. So I want to think beyond just entertainers. There are people in our lives, no matter what, who are influencers who may not be woke or
Right.
conscious. Go ahead, Tamika.
No, I was going to say that, Mark, while you weren't here, I said that you were my elder. And
You all
as
said
an
it
old
too.
man, I'm just
The first,
Right.
if he a millennial, he the first millennial. Like 1500. Go ahead, Tamika.
But I was going to say that I think I benefit in that way. You know, you're a blessed person if you benefit from having elders or just folks who are slightly older than you and younger people that can work together at the same time, as you were mentioning. And the reason why my son and I came together is because of this very question. I was going into school speaking to students, and they were looking at me like, well, your clothes are cute, but like, yeah, okay. Like, you know, it wasn't clicking.
And you look like you were the same age.
Yeah, but it didn't work. I think I got a little bit too much sauce from the old folks that I couldn't necessarily translate my message over to younger people. You know, I had the look, but not necessarily the language that it takes. And certainly, even with my 19-year-old son, when I get off the phone cussing him out, he calls my son to get a translation of what it is that I was saying. And it has worked. In fact, I can, you know, read to you where a few nights ago he texted me and said that he was grateful that our relationship is beginning to come around. And it is because of the time that Mice has spent working with him, trying to help him understand, but you can't just say what you want to say in her house. Like, you need your own house, my man. Like, you just can't. You know what I mean? Like, straight up.
You can't say what you want to say to him.
True.
Because he's still an individual and he feels.
Right, he tells me.
Yeah, but I'm paying all them bills. I'm
Right.
sorry, go ahead.
And that's important because in the last situation that, and I mean, I like to try to put things in literal terms so people can really get it, right? Because I can say all of the good stuff, but really, in literal terms, the last situation that my son and I got into, because it's a rocky road. I mean, he's 19. I think I'm important. He thinks he's important. It's rough, you know what I mean? And he's also very privileged. And the last situation that we got into, I chose to listen to what my son was telling me, which was that I took my tone all the way down. I didn't get, because usually I'm all the way out here about you. I don't care what you go listen to with the teacher. I don't care if the teacher has nooses hanging from the ceiling. You better go to school and do what that damn teacher tells you to do. That's how I, basically, it's unfortunate, but that's how I talk to him. But my son was saying, you know, he's growing into his manhood. And here you are as his mother, sort of demoralizing him and speaking to him in a way that belittles him as a man. He's not going to be able to respond to that. So the last time that we've had it, I listened, I heard that, and I retreated. And when it was all said and done, he began to pour into me information that I didn't know about his life. And that was very different. And it has been the same in every situation. I think the lesson that I learned, Roland, is that while I may do well on college campuses, when I get to high schools, I have to go find my son to come with me, and my ego can't be so big that I can't accept the fact that the high school is not the best place for me to go and translate my message if I want us all to get free.
Right.
If I'm serious about the freedom of black people and our young people, then my ego has to be set to the side, and I have to realize that that might not be the message, but when I walk in the door with the Mices and the Yandies and all of that, then I'm cool. You know what I mean? I'm cool. And the young people, they say, okay, well, she brought these people here. Maybe I'll follow her, and maybe she has something that I need. And what I realize and what I recognize over time that makes me feel proud is that younger women who may not have listened to me in high school, by the time they get to college, they contact me and say, I want to do what you're doing.
Right.
How do I get it?
See, I've had the advantage of, so I'm on the scene in 2007, 2008, Obama was running. So the folks who were 10 are now 22. No, I mean, I really have people say, dude, I ain't know jack about politics until I started watching you, and now I'm running for office. And so it's understanding your role. I got to ask this question, one Ray to pick up.
But you can't go past that. Because I think that it is extremely important for us to stay here today. That whether it be Angela Rye or Jamira Burley, or the list, Mark Lamont Hill, the list goes on. If it had not been for Roland giving us a platform, and even for Mark Thompson allowing us to use their airwaves to get our message across, y'all would know, like the stories would not be told when you talk about the storytelling. You know, all of these folks, you see Angela on TV, and clearly, this is a bad chick, right? Like, she's got it going on. And I remember when Angela was like me, just shaking, trying to get the words out on your show. And we appreciate you for doing that work, because and we will not wait until you pass on for us to tell the story of how Roland Martin put us on. You know?
Last year for this session.
That's right.
She was here last year for this session.
I think it's very important to note when you talk about Jay-Z and Harry Belafonte, you talk about that there was a disconnect, there was an issue. And I think when you look at the way Jay-Z deals with his youth now, he's learned from that.
Yep.
If you look at the way he embraces Meek Mill, he educates him about what's going on, the way he took the 21 Savage situation, and you hear a kid like 21 Savage who was nothing but guns and starting to elevate his mind and talk about property and talk about civil rights, things that's going on. I think that that's what it is. It's taking that time to understand your elder and learning from that and embracing the kids, meeting them, teaching them within their ignorance. That's one of the things that I say, always say, you have to teach people within their ignorance. You got to meet people where they are. A lot of people don't like the language that I use in my music. A lot of older, like, why do you got to use the N-word? Because unfortunately, there are people that hear the N-word and connect with me that won't connect with you. Unfortunately, that's the world we live in. They hear that and they feel like they can connect to me more. And if that's what it's going to take for me to connect to the youth that y'all figured that y'all can't connect with, then that's my goal. My goal is to get the people that might not be saved by using the colloquialism or the language that you feel is deemed proper. So who's going to save those that don't listen to what it is that you're talking about? So we have to identify with that. We have to say, there is a community, there's a culture that is being left by a lot of our pseudo Negroes who have got to a certain place and they've forgotten that these kids exist. So who is connecting with them? Who's bringing them to the next level?
I also want,
I challenge him on that.
I
want to challenge him on that.
Okay. At the end of this panel. So we got like 25 minutes. I'm gonna put this out here, and then I'm gonna ask the next question, and I'm gonna Ray to answer to speak to this. You're absolutely right in terms of reaching folks, in terms of the way you reach them. The flip side is also how, if you're in your position, you also can elevate people.
But that's like you reach him and then elevate.
No.
You don't elevate him from the beginning.
No. Actually, you can. Let me show you how. I can't tell you the number of times brothers have come up to me and said, bro, you got mad respect on the yard. And they were not talking about Morgan State. They were talking about the prison yard. I've had numerous cats say, I got through prison watching your show on TV. The stuff you were talking about, the issues, you bring on comedian stuff, and I'm talking about cats from all over. About a month ago, a guy told me his limo driver, who has a company now, brother was in prison for 20 years, and they took TV One off the cable system, and they shut the prison down to force it to get put back on, because they said, no, we watch his show every morning. So what I'm saying is, you don't know who you're reaching, who you're impacting. And so whatever level you're on, you can actually impact somebody's life. It's just a matter of what is the level of integrity and credibility you bring to the table that's going to get them to listen.
But I also want to say,
I want to jump
just
in
one
on
thing.
this too, as a panelist.
Hold on. Mysonne, you.
Thank
Okay,
you.
he will respond to you.
But
Then I'm going to ask a
I'm-
question to Ray. Go.
Being formerly incarcerated after spending 7 years of my life in prison, I understand that when you're in prison, that's the most calmest you are in your life, is when you actually intake information. There's not a lot of outside influence on it. So when somebody has the opportunity to sit down and actually listen to what you're saying, it's a lot easier than when you inside life and you feel like life is going on.
Got it.
Then
I got it. Go right ahead.
Yeah. Now, I was just going to just take a point of privilege, and I have a lot of nerves since I was recruited on this panel, not absolutely invited. But I know that Fire Rose is the person who's the reason for me being here and for most of us being here. And I know she had a point that she wanted to make, and I just would like to take a point of privilege to see if she can make that point.
And she the one told me to get the panel started.
Yeah, but then
For 4
Roland,
o'clock on Conrad. Go ahead, go ahead.
Roland, hold on one second. Let me just finish my point. I also would have liked to see more interaction from the audience. That's why I think.
No, we going to the audience.
Yeah, okay.
But we got to get y'all.
Okay.
I got it. Trust me. This is my first rodeo. I got it.
Yeah, mine either.
Now, speak loud, because we also live streaming too.
God is good, because the point I was going to make, these young men just walked into this building. And these are the young men that I've been working with. And they can tell you, I don't allow them to use that word nigger around me. Right? Right? And I think that you do have the lip, but there are certain things I will tolerate. I'm going to tell y'all publicly. Susan Taylor told me to apologize to y'all, because I raised the issue of what I did. And I apologize to you publicly. Because in the other session, one thing we have to do with young people, when we're wrong, we have to say we're wrong.
True.
And I'll be honest. I was going to tell Michael, you remember you were walking, and I gave me the whole story. And I posed what happened, and she said, you need to apologize to them. And I did, and I'm doing it publicly. But there's certain things we cannot tolerate. There's got to be a bottom line. And so once you know that history, once you know that where that word nigger comes from, and once you understand that the impact of it is to continue to niggerize yourself and your community and your women and your children, certain things can't be tolerated. And even my favorite comedian, when he went to Africa, he said nobody in Africa was calling each other nigger. So I do have to go now, but I'm really proud of these young people. In Selma, in their community, named after George Washington Carver, 2 young black men were killed, what, a month ago? Percy, during the Thanksgiving holidays, 2 of his cousins, by the name Sanders, no kin to me, were killed. We have serious problems, y'all. Mm-hmm. And we do have to, and I think to relate to our young people, we don't have to use their language. We can require another language. I gotta go.
I got it. So, hold on. I'm gonna let you say it. If y'all need a seat, we're like in church. Raise your hands. There's an open seat next to you.
Seats right
you can
there.
take a seat. So y'all got seats right here. And so,
Mr. Martin, I'm sorry.
Right here.
Just give it 20 minutes. The question I wanted to raise was, what about shared leadership? We talk about passing the torch. I really think this sister's been amazing with me. I couldn't have done this work this year without her. It's shared leadership. Just make sure you get that point. When I leave here, please come to the Enslavement Museum. We're going to induct a mighty warrior into the Harlem Resistance. We'll wait for y'all 15 minutes later. We'll be there at 4:15.
okay, my son, make your point. Then I gotta raise something. I want to go to Ray. Go.
I just want to make just one point. If me utilizing that word can save more lives than me not utilizing that word, would you rather me utilize that word and grab people from the streets that normally wouldn't connect with me, or just continue on a path that doesn't work for them?
But I'm saying the word.
I'm just saying, I hear what
I'm
you're
saying-
saying, but listen, I'm just saying, I have a study
That is
that's
a-
proven, it's proven
Maybe that's
that
a-
I'm able to meet these kids, certain kids that listen to certain music, that I'm able to get them and save them and stop them and educate them, to elevate them, to evolve them, to make them walk away from these streets just by using one
It's
word.
the same purpose. I think you can accomplish the same purpose using a different language. We have to change the language, not just niggers. We have to change the language for us. Stop calling ourselves slaves. We were enslaved. an achievement gap. It's an opportunity gap. We have to change the whole language of
Got
giving each other.
Now,
I think you're credible one enough to find another way.
That's another intersection of the that we have is that we so focused on language that we're not even focused on results.
Okay, so here's the piece.
I'm focused on results, brother.
All right.
And you get your results.
Okay, one second. Okay, pull your phone out. I got another thing you need to go look up. I want you to pull your phone out. Polaroid Revolutionary Workers Movement. I want you to look up Polaroid Revolutionary Workers Movement. So I'm going to set this up, and I want Ray to speak to it, and then anybody else wants to jump in. So Colin Kaepernick, when he sat down, it was a member of the military special forces who said, that's disrespectful, take a knee. He took a knee. I do not believe that Colin Kaepernick fully expected the reaction from America from that. I don't believe that John Carlos and Tommy Smith expected that reaction rate. The reason I bring up Polaroid Revolutionary Workers Movement, because it was two people, Ken Williams and Carolyn Hunter, who walked into the lobby. They saw this passbook, which basically was like a passport, a photo, that Polaroid was supplying that in South Africa.
Yes.
Ken Williams said, we're going to fight this. Carolyn Hunter was a 24-year-old recent college graduate chemistry major who her mama said, baby, you got you a good job. Why are you trying to mess this thing up? You better lose your job. If people want to engage in justice, social justice raids, but they don't always understand there's going to be a cost. I want to be able to speak to the cost, and the Gregory family can speak to this, the cost of when you decide to stand up. You might be in middle school or high school, and there's going to be repercussions. The kid in Florida who was booted out of school because he wouldn't do the Pledge of Allegiance. That's right. There are repercussions. So I want folks here to speak to that there's a cost that exists when you decide to stand up for righteousness. Ray, go ahead.
You know, there's an Ethiopian word, jegna. Some of you have heard of it. And a jegna is somebody who, first of all, knows the history of their community thoroughly. They understand everything about their community. They protect the community at the cost of their life. And the third thing, they will not let anyone attack their community. We need more jegnas. You know, Malcolm was a jegna. King was a jegna. Fannie Lou Hamer was a jegna. Ida B. Wells, we can go back, Martin Delaney, I mean, we can call the roll. One of the things that I'm concerned about now, we don't have that many jegnas. We have people who are posing as, and I don't want to get, you know, as civil rights leaders and others, but we have to have more jegnas.
Talk about the truth.
And one of the things that we have to be willing to do is sacrifice going to jail, sometimes with our lives. We have to be able to do that. And a lot of us, and I ain't talking about young people or old, I'm talking about all of us. We don't have that many jegnas in our community anymore. And that is what pushes movements beyond where they are right now. So, you know, we just got to do more and be willing to sacrifice. Our salary of black people are afraid of white people. And it doesn't mean that they tremble when they see them, but it means they're afraid of losing the mortgage, the salary, tuition for their children, and everything else like that. And we have to be more fearless. She said that we need to sometimes have a national conference on black fear to decide what black people are afraid of. And we're afraid.
That's a show idea.
And it's no, because we know what, you know, people classified as white have done to us. And they've done it in ways that are, you know, absolutely insidious. So I think we need more jegnas, and I think we have to be willing to sacrifice. I'm inspired.
You said jegnas. Spell it for folks who don't know.
Jegna.
Got it.
Yeah.
Anybody? Go ahead.
Yes.
Go ahead. Gregory, y'all go ahead.
Oh, I was just going to say, around the whole idea of sacrifice. In our family growing up, the the concept of abundance was never given to us in the context of money, ever. And so, you know, people used to ask my father as a comedian when he began to transition all that celebrity and fortune, fame into the movement, reporters would ask him, you know, aren't you concerned that your involvement in the civil rights movement is going to negatively affect your comedy career? Because he was giving it all up. And he said, the question you should be asking is, will my comedy career negatively affect my involvement in this movement? And then there were people close to him that's like, Brother Greg, what's this going to do to your pocket if you do this? And he said, what will it do to my spirit if I don't? And so the question became, you know, here was a man who literally risked his life on a daily, survived 3 assassination attempts, and I asked him, like, we literally lost our house, talking about the mortgage, in 1992. Johansi and I were both at Howard. Times was tight, and a good friend of the family gave my father a check, 6-figure check, to save the house on the 300 acres. At the same time, Forsyth County needed it. My father signed it over to the movement, and we lost the house. So he was serious.
No, hold on. Wait. I want you to repeat that for somebody in the room who's sleeping who missed it. And then we're streaming it because, again, y'all were on the verge of losing the house. A friend handed your daddy a 6-figure check to keep the house. And he did what?
He signed it over to the movement, and we lost the house.
That's a jack.
That's a jack. That's a Can somebody explain that to me right now?
Unpack. I need you to understand. Every person in the room, whether you're young or old, I'm saying this, I'm pushing this, and I want this panel to discuss this for a reason. Because when Dr. King got killed, the autopsy said he had the heart of a man who was nearly 70. He was 39. When you look at the daughters of Malcolm X, in that final year and a half, he spent 5 months in Africa. So people who put their lives on the line, they literally don't see husbands or wives or children. They're away from home. They lose stuff. They can make lots of, and again, understand that when you make a decision, you might make it thinking it's only for tomorrow, but it literally could have lifelong repercussions when you decide to stand up for justice. Go ahead, Jessica.
I just want to piggyback off of what Sister Gregory said here. I think that it is so imperative that we stop fighting within our community. We have to stop fighting each other. So just like her father had that heart big enough to say, you know, I'm going to give everything, my very last, everything, back to my community. We have to just realize, because even this weekend alone, dealing with this Selma Jubilee, I have fought so many of our own people in trying to do something that's right that I'm tired. I'm tired. So by the time I leave the house to go out into the community where now I have to fight the oppressor, I'm too weak. I'm too weak. So I think it's time that we get to the point that we care so much about our community like that, where we're, sis, I got you. Me and Tamika, we call each other sis, like, sis, I got you. Brother, what do you need? We have to get to that point that we are caring for one another again, and we're treating each other like family, because we can't go out there and fight the oppressor. We talk about all these movements and stuff, but they can't be successful if we keep on tearing each other down within.
Go ahead.
There are so many unsung heroes that we don't even know about who've made those ultimate sacrifices, not just laid down their lives, because that is the ultimate, but there are so many who've lost jobs, who gave up prominent positions, who decided that they were going to be resistance warriors, decided that they were going to be freedom fighters, decided before they knew what a Jetna was that they were going to be Jetnas. So I want to lift up that lifestyle. I want to lift up that persona, because sometimes in the 501c3 movement, where you get grants from the slave master, those are equated with excellence and commitment and skill. Just because you were able to schmooze and get some money from the slave master doesn't make you more talented than a Taribu or an Nkichi or a Barbara Arnwine. We struggle to keep our organizations afloat. We got just as much talent, if not more. We don't make what our colleagues make as lawyers, certainly not, but they have they think that because we don't make that kind of money, we're not as good as lawyers, and that's just not the case. Chokwe never made me money. He did what Dick Gregory did. He gave up everything for the movement, and yet he was one of the best teachers of the law. He taught all of us to be the revolutionary lawyers that we are. So genuineness is the word. I want to teach you.
Okay, you just mentioned a lawyer. I need you to spell the name so folks who don't know can go look it up.
Chokwe?
Yes.
Oh, yes, with pleasure. Chokwe. Lumumba, as in Patrice Lumumba. Lumumba.
If you don't know Patrice Lumumba, that's Patrice. So that's two Lumumbas you got to go look up. Okay, go ahead. And then I'm going to take some questions from the audience now. Get your questions ready. Not your statements, not your sermons, not your dissertations, your questions. Go.
So when you ask about sacrifice, and as my sister Yana was noting, I literally could sit here for a week and tell you stories of our father's sacrifice. As a financial person, I recently did the calculations of those documented things that I knew of that my father gave away. And in 2019 dollars, my father, I know he gave away at least $300 million worth of it. I actually saw the contract in 1985.
Equivalent of 300 million.
With in 1963 alone, he immediately wrote a check for $25,000. That was worth $300,000 today to give to make Thanksgiving possible in Mississippi. Hugh Hefner talked about the $2 million worth of engagements, comedic engagements, he gave up to attend civil rights events. But the important thing, like I said, we can talk about it for days. That's who we were. That's what we saw throughout our entire life. But one important thing to note is this. We all got a role to play. When we talk about gender, when people say, what would your dad say now? Who's going to be the next Dick Gregory? Not everybody can be Dick Gregory. Right. Growing up at his footsteps, there are times I look back and say, could I have done that? And I'm somebody who's directly benefited from it. When my father said no to being on the Jack Parr show in 1959 because Jack Parr didn't allow black people to sit on the couch, my mother was taking care of the family. They were living not in a 2-bedroom apartment. They were living in a 2-room house with 2 daughters, and she was working as a secretary. And the kitchen was all the way 3 floors below them. Okay? And it was a time where he was making $50 a week. And by saying yes, being on the Jack Parr show, it would have meant he would have made $5,000 a night. But he still said no. I don't know if I could have said that. I don't know if I could have done that. But what the important thing to know is this. There's a role for all of us. So while there are those folks sacrificing on the front end, there were also those, and we know that, when we look at the real history of the Green Book and what that was about. Every time those places where King couldn't stay, where Abernathy couldn't stay, where Benjamin couldn't stay, there were no kind of shortage of families, of husbands, of wives, of children, who were making their homes available, who were cooking food. So what we have to do is, when we have those jegnas out there, those of us who aren't that, we have to play that supportive position. But the other important thing to know, and I'll say this, is that when we talk about cultivating those, because in many ways, some people believe you're born that, right? They're out there. We're not cultivating them. You know who's cultivating them? Don't wait till they get to the NBA. Nike right now has camps not every year, every month, already identifying the next LeBron. Okay?
Yep.
Reebok has it. Adidas has it. And guess what? Do you think they're teaching them just about basketball? No. Do you think they're teaching them that when you make it pro, make sure you have a black lawyer, black agent, black doctor, black financial investor? Absolutely not.
Sir.
Right now, Harvard, Princeton, all the Ivy Leagues are holding conferences on hip-hop, okay? And bringing in the best and brightest for us so they can own and control it. Well, let me just say this. Young folks, black folks, you are the most influential people on this planet. Okay? We talk about influence and social media influence, and you know, we heard about the Fire Festival. That was a story of how a whole bunch of folks got duped because of influence. They've been following you in your style forever. Yep. And so and they know how powerful you are. People around the world, I was just at the Indigenous Peoples March, and there were people there from Australia.
They knew more about some young black communities than I knew. And so don't let them trick you into thinking that you have to follow this, dress this, wear this. You are the original creators of everything, and they're still following you. And I thank you a lot.
Before I open up for questions, I want to take that point. How many of y'all recently saw the Sam Cooke documentary on Netflix?
Awesome.
Okay. How many of y'all saw the Teddy Pendergrass documentary on Showtime? All right.
Yeah.
No, but have you thought about it this way? Let's just take Sam Cooke. Here you had Sam Cooke, unbelievable voice, and his publishing was essentially stolen by the guy he hired.
That's right.
That same guy wrecked the Beatles, stole from the Rolling Stones. So I'm watching the documentary, and I'm going, who did the documentary? Did they look like Sam Cooke?
No.
So you have a cycle that literally is repeating itself.
Yeah, that's right.
Took his publishing and still making money off of his life. And I'm saying that as somebody who's in the content business, because we have to be in a situation where we are actually controlling the narrative.
Yeah.
And when you talk about the sacrifice, look, in December of 2017, when TV One said, or the CEO said, we're canceling your show, I immediately said, I'm launching my own digital platform. But here's what's the interesting part, and then this to your point about working together. I have had conversations with nearly every other black media company, and not one wants to collaborate. Even though all of them are on all these individual islands. So we are here, although we're in the panel, so we are live streaming it. The gigabytes, the camera, the staffer, I'm paying for all of it. So when people are like, hey, why don't you come down? No. I'm actually paying for it. There's nobody else behind me. And so when we talk about how do we support each other, people are like, oh man, I love your show, but do you give? Oh man, that was a great interview you did with Ali Sadiq, but how do you think it happened? And so we can't be in these spaces talking about we want to do all these things if we are unwilling to literally fund them. And that's the piece. And if we don't, then folks like me who are in media are literally forced to go to somebody else and work for somebody else. And then guess what? We don't own the content. And just like Ray Charles said, if you don't own your masters, the master owns you. The same thing in media. And so we just need to understand that as we move forward. All right, we're going to go to questions. I'm going to go this side, this side, this side, this side. And so I'm going to start with somebody 40 and under. I'm going to start that way. How old are you?
39.
I'm checking IDs. All right, what's your question?
Okay, my question is going off of what you said about how Dr. King never publicly, said anything bad about opponents. I ran for Congress last year. My name is Dr. Dia Winfrey. I ran for U.S. House. And to be quite frank, my heart was broken by the elders in the community. But I was blessed last week with the opportunity to now be chair of the Democratic Party in my county here in Alabama.
Okay.
So now I want to be able to extend the olive branch, work with those same elders because I see the bigger picture and I'm trying to put my feelings to the side and just push the movement. And so I wanted some tips, some advice from some of the elders on the panel. How do I handle that?
One person to answer for the next question. So Ray, I saw Ray. Ray was before you. He threw his spoke. No, I said Ray.
Oh, Ray, I'm sorry.
No, real quick. I heard
it's like Jeopardy. You gotta be quick.
Yeah, I heard a few minutes ago we used the term crabs in a barrel with black folks. But I always tell people that we need to talk about what the barrel is.
Yeah.
In other words, how did the crabs get in the barrel?
That's right.
Why are they trying to get out of the barrel? And frankly, what do we do with destroying the barrel? I think the barrel is white supremacy.
Absolutely.
And people classified as white in the system have taught us to divide. You Delta, I'm AKA. You Kappa, I'm Q. Whatever. And what we've got to do is start saying need to unite around opposing white supremacy.
Yes.
Teach it to our children.
Yep.
Teach it to ourselves. So I would say, almost like what Thea did a few minutes ago, go to them and try to make peace. They may need to be making peace, but show them that you can sit down, be humble with them, and they'll may be humble with you.
And if they don't want to sit down, that's on them.
That's it.
You did your part. Real quick, 20
But
seconds.
just 20 seconds. Sometimes it's not possible because there is race traitor. There are race traitors and there's betrayal.
True.
That can't be forgiven. So I just want us to balance it because some of the things that's happening to our people at the hands of those who look like us should not be excused. And we should comment on it and we should put it down whenever it happens.
Question.
We shouldn't just excuse that type of behavior that goes to threaten us and even try to kill us.
Question.
First off, assalamu alaikum.
Speak up louder.
First off, assalamu alaikum for all my brothers and sisters who are part of the nation.
Walaikum salam, brother.
My question that I have to ask is, do you all believe that the village system in which the village used to raise a child should be back incorporated in our modern day system?
Yes.
All right. Go ahead, Ms. Flagler. Y'all say you're shaking your head like this.
I definitely think that should be incorporated back into our community. I feel like, you can't learn everything from one person. It takes others to be able to, enhance your knowledge, enhance you being able to advance. So I definitely agree with having a village being able to raise a child. My mom might not know everything. My dad might not know everything. But, the neighbor down the street might know something that she doesn't know. So I feel that is a component to us being able to advance in this society.
Go ahead.
Hi. So, as the daughter of Harvey Cadell and Margaret Cadell, I feel like I was fortunate to have two really awesome parents. But at the same time, I see how other adults, as I was growing up, really shaped me to be who I am today. And so, something that I was telling a friend recently is that we have a village mentality selectively sometimes when it's convenient for us. And with young people, I think that comes in the sense of the young people should respect all the elders. But I'm like, but do all the elders see young people as their children, right? Because a lot of times when bad things happen to young people, we say, well, where were the parents? Where were the parents? And it's like, there are children in foster care, there are children whose parents died. So not everyone has the privilege of having two able parents to raise them. And so when we want young people to see us as the adults that should be respected, we have to remember that they're the children that need to be protected. And so we have to go outside of well, where are the parents? It's like, okay, well, we can ask about the parents to get a sense of the situation.
Right.
But then other than that, we have to say, well, what can we do as a community to help them?
What you turn around for? Raise your hand.
Oh, yeah, I'm sorry. I didn't know you were still under the...
I remember everything. Ask your question.
Okay, yeah, so I just want to speak to the importance of when we talk about sacrifice and struggling and supporting those who struggle and support for us. I remember when I was young, we were in the streets talking about getting Nelson Mandela out of prison, etc. But, today, in this country, we have people who are in exile, Asada Shakur in prison, Sunana Kohli, Matula Shakur and the left, Mumia Mujamal, list goes on. And we talk about things like the young people, Black Lives Matter, quote, Assad all the time, it's our duty to fight for our freedoms, it's our duty to wear, etc. But you don't hear the underlying support for the issues that they were struggling about. So I guess my question is, how do we raise up and lift these names, and many of these names are names some people probably never even heard of, but support those who struggle for us right here in this country? And maybe we as the older generation have not imparted it enough so that the youth, know and, can do that. But I just find it very frustrating.
Right. I will answer your question this way. No, I will answer this way. I'm going to use sports as an example. When you have discussions today about the greatest basketball player, it's LeBron or Michael Jordan. As if Bill Russell didn't exist, even though he's still alive. As if the only person to win 6 MVPs in any league, Kareem Abdul-Jabbar, didn't exist. So what happens is people, and oftentimes, this is not just black people only know really what's in front of them. As opposed to Ray's point we started off, having an understanding of history. So one of the reasons I've always been able to be that connector, because even at a young age, I understood history. So I would integrate that in my comments, and so older folks would be like, hey, that little young man, he knows history. So they saw that as an appreciation of that period of time, and were willing to say, okay, I'm going to put something in him. And so part of the problem there is using, to one of the panelists' point, using present day tools to educate a new generation. I'm going to use Congresswoman Maxine Waters as an example. How does an 81-year-old black woman be beloved by millennials? Because it's what she's saying. And so what is needed is for older folks to embrace social media, to embrace Facebook, Snapchat, Instagram, Twitter, and use it for the purpose of informing and not hope somebody else does it, and then that's actually answered, and that's how people sort of see it. I'm gonna go to this side over here. Go question, go. I know, hold on, you can innovate your answer. Go ahead.
So with over $4 billion of economic influence and buying power, how do we leverage interracial?
Hold up, 4 billion. That's low.
Well, over.
Oh.
Trillion.
1.3 trillion.
1.3 trillion. How do we leverage intergenerational relationships to drive financial literacy and empowerment in the African American community?
Okay, Mr. Financial Planner.
So, you hit exactly on the point of what my large focus and point has been here this summer. First of all, you talk about intergenerational. When we talk about intergenerational wealth, there are very few of us in our community that can count wealth more than 2 or 3 generations.
First of all, if you're going to use the word wealth, I need you to define what's wealth, because our definition is different from the actual definition.
Absolutely. So when we talk about wealth, we're talking about net worth. We're not talking about what your salary, your income is, right? Because I tell people this all the time. If you make $1 million a year, but spend $1 million in one, you're still going to be in debt, right? So when we look at economic development, first we have to start with talking about financial literacy. Growing up, and Jan can speak to this as well, there are many folks, white folks, that grow up middle class, but because they've had not just wealth handed down intergenerational, but financial literacy handed down intergenerationally, they are much more abundant than some of our highest paid celebrities. We also need to understand the history that has worked against us. It's not just the history of slavery. It's not just the history of Jim Crow. Throughout the history of America to today, the white supremacist system has worked historically to devalue black folks of their wealth. Historically. So, we could talk about this forever, but one important thing to know is that when we sit down in our schools, we need to make sure, whether you're a community member, if you're a board member, whatever that is, we need to make sure that in our curriculum, in our schools, we're talking about economic empowerment and financial literacy. There are things that we are going to have to be intentional about inserting into the dialogue with our young folks that some communities may not have to worry about, right? Because we're not getting it at home. We're not getting it at the block party. We're not getting it maybe from our cousin's house or this, that, whatever. So we have to be intentional about that. There are numerous curriculum out there that speak about financial literacy, but more importantly, where that starts with, and Roland was talking about this before, about what we own and control, is that when we're involved in situations like this here in Selma, that we're not just going to the free stuff, okay? That we are spending our dollars in our community here. When we are involved, just like and I mentioned this earlier this morning, my father would talk about this, that we've got black families that will save thousands of dollars all year long so that they can drive down to Orlando to go to Disney, and as he would say, to spend that money to see a rat, right? But drive right through Georgia on the way and not even think to stop and pay homage to Dr. King, who made it possible for them to even be able to be allowed in the doors of Disney. So within us, we need to incorporate that conversation and that literacy within our educational system with our young people. But we also have to demonstrate. We have to show our children that we're going out of our way to find every black business in our neighborhood to spend those dollars there. We have to show them and demonstrate with them that we're going out
up our way to save money just like we would for a major vacation, to spend in an area that's black involved and black owned. And like Roland said, we've got to support our business.
Also, Barry, what was your comment then? Real quick, I'm going to.
I wanted to speak to Sister Nkichi's comment about, because it goes to consciousness, it goes to political education, it goes to having a resistance curriculum, where we don't just do sort of what I call festive type actions. We actually dig deep and we begin to learn and understand what capitalism is. What is U.S. imperialism? What is the role of the United States across the world in terms of domination? This is not just jargon. This is us clearing our minds and, as Bob Marley said, emancipating ourselves from mental slavery. The only way we can really, really be free is to understand the system that dominates us. And to do that, I think intergenerational study groups, we used to have those when we were learning how to be Marxist-Leninist and study all of that, and study also revolutionary African socialism and other ideologies. We had study groups, and we were young when we did that. But why we are not trying to create that culture or trying to promote the culture of studying toward resistance, I don't know why. But I know I am willing, and I'm on Facebook, and I'm a commentator on Facebook. I don't do favorite recipes on Facebook. And my phone message that you see on the iPhone 10, hello, I'm almost 70 and I have an iPhone 10, and it says, Walmart sucks the life out of our communities. That's my screensaver. So if you want to read up on ways that we use Facebook intergenerationally as old people using Facebook and Twitter, friend me, please.
So,
Reboot Hill, friend me.
Real quick, a couple of things that are very practical. And that's one of the things that I'm always believing on. First, I believe we talk about this issue of financial literacy. We should be having honest conversations with our children about how much stuff costs.
That's right.
So I just wanted to understand that. So that's one thing. Second thing that we should also understand is the power of collecting. And a lot of people who got upset with me when I posted on my Instagram page, imagine if all of us who saw Black Panther gave the equivalent of those two ticket prices to your favorite HBCU. There were all these people who got mad at me. They got mad. Why can't you let us enjoy the moment? That's not going to have an impact on HBCU. And I said, you do know the only way Black Panther made $242 million this opening weekend was because of individual ticket sales. And people literally could not associate giving $20 or $30 to the HBCU, multiplied by 100 or 1,000, and thinking that wouldn't have an impact. Bennett just raised $5 million, not because 10 celebrities gave $500,000, because a bunch of people gave $20 and $30. And so we have to also understand collective. It's amazing how people have no understanding of that, and they think, oh, my little amount of money won't matter. I'm like, no, actually it does when it's combined with a bunch of other people. A couple of, let me give you some. No, yeah, that's why I'm saying, raise your hand. That's why anybody can raise their hand. You got to be willing to do it. So I'm going to go to this side, and I'm going to go over here. Let me give you this here. This is no shock. The two cops who shot and killed Stephon Clark in Sacramento, the DA just announced they will not be charged. And then the Department of Justice also, they will not file civil rights charges against the former cop, woman, Crutcher. And so I put a 40 and under on the first question. Now I'm going to do a 20 and under. So anybody over here, 20 and under, you have a question? Come on, y'all. Okay, y'all sleep. Over here, what you got? All right. How old are you?
I am 38.
No, you gotta sit down. No. No, you don't have a question. Somebody else. Anybody? If you have a question, how are you? Okay, yes, you can ask a question. Go ahead. Stand up. Yes, you have to stand up. Project.
I don't know what they carry. I'm sorry. But basically, my question is, how can, as an older generation, you give younger children more of a confidence besides saying, you're too young, you haven't learned yet on what to do, instead of when young kids have ideas, giving them more of a chance to have a platform or start something where it can become a movement as they get older.
Gotcha. Ms. Black, Illinois, you want to answer? I see you. Nod your head. Go ahead.
Okay, so at the age of 8, I founded a nonprofit organization, One Step at a Time, that raises funds for shelters in East St. Louis. And I can promise you, being 8 years old, everybody took me as a joke. Simple as that. You know, I had tons of adults that say, you're too young, you need to be outside playing. But you know, the problem with that is you never know when you're called and what happens. And I find that as being like, you need to understand that when I have an idea, you be able to work with me. You know, the way that the older generation can do that is by being able to, you know, listen to that idea, being able to enhance that idea, not just knock it down as I mentioned earlier. So, older generation, we really need you. We need you more than ever to be able to be better for tomorrow. So, just working with us is the main thing that you can do.
Jessica, any question? Jessica.
I'm gonna piggyback off of what she said. I have a 14-year-old daughter who is an entrepreneur, has a very successful DJing business. And she came into that. Some weekends, I'm not even gonna lie, she makes more money than me. She come home like loaded, and I'm like, wow, you know. But I think that we have
pay some bills.
Right, I know, right? Roland, I'm gonna sign up with you. No, but you have to you have to listen. I think we have to listen to the younger generations and look at what their passions and their interests are, and then help guide them towards where they should be. So I think that that is one way that we can make sure that we are, you know, not shunning away the younger generation and actually making sure that we incorporate their thoughts, their interests, and what they actually enjoy doing. To turn around and make that money, Jay, that you were talking, you know, you were asking about. That's what we're gonna do.
Question.
Mentorship is key.
Yes, absolutely.
Last question right here.
Okay. So I'm born and raised here in Selma, just to kind of set my question up for you. So it's really easy to start the conversations, and it's even harder to sustain those movements, especially when you're looking for assistance from notable people who come to like the big events, to the places that you know they need help, such as the Selma Jubilee. However, on Monday, after the Jubilee, things change, things go back to the way they are. We never hear from these notable people again, and the morale goes back down. So what would you say to people who are local leaders who are trying to sustain that movement, but they don't get the help that they really need?
I'm going to have Tamika answer this, but I'm going to also start this way. I'm going to give you another book. You need to read Barbara Ransby's book on Ella Baker. Okay. Ella Baker, first of all, one of the greatest organizers who we often don't talk about enough. Okay. Ella Baker, where she and Dr. King clashed, he believed it was pulpit to pew. She believed it was pew to pulpit. She was an organizer with the NAACP, then of course, then basically built SCLC, then also leader of STIC. But here was the other piece. When she went into cities, she identified local leaders who were already doing the work. And she said, as an outsider, we're here to assist. So you actually have it reversed. You're looking for people on the outside to help here in Selma, where what you should be doing is mobilizing and organizing in Selma. And then if they come in, they can assist. And so that's actually how it works. You build it here first. They don't live here. They can come in to assist, but you got to mobilize, organize locally first. Tamika.
I think that I agree with you what you said about studying Ella Baker, and that should be on the list too, because you said to read the book about her, but people should read her work as well directly. And that decentralized leadership model that I think at this moment in history, we're actually following the decentralized model a little bit more than it was accepted, you know, in the past, which means that there are multiple leaders, that our movements are leader-full rather than one leader-less. But I would say to you, that's the challenge, right? The challenge is keeping it going. And I think the problem is that we equate big crowds with movement, instead of understanding that it's really the 2 or 3 that are consistent that can really move the needle. And if you get a good group of 5 to 10 solid people who are willing to keep meeting and keep, you know, being there, you'll be able to meet the challenge. There will come a moment when the issue will be right in front of you, or there will be something that you can mobilize around that will put you in the spotlight to that you're looking for, there will be a moment, but you have to be consistent.
Yep.
And you have to be willing to toil in those moments when people are not present, when they're not looking. That's what being a real leader is all about. You know, prior to the Women's March, a lot of people got to know me through the Women's March, right? So that's what people are like, oh, who's Tamika Mallory? And I actually kind of resent that because, you know, I was doing work for a long time, even, you know, prior to the Women's March. And there were many moments, Mysonne will tell you, where in order for us to get to it, Roland, I think about how many days we did your show at 7 o'clock in the morning, walking from New York City to Washington, D.C. with 100 people to make an issue about, you know, criminal justice reform, advocating for particular issues. There was small rooms where 20 to 30 of us were getting together through the Justice League, which is a network that my son and I have helped to sustain with Carmen Perez and Linda. And you see us now in front of this big movement where there are 5 million people worldwide, but we started out not even being able to get in the newspaper. And that, you know, some days I wish I could go back to that, because now if I tweet boo, they're like, well, did she mean this? And what was she saying? The other day, I said that I thought Beyonce was pretty hot in my own way. I was just like, oh, she kills me. And the Beehive went crazy on me. Like, oh, it was all on blogs. They were like, what is she saying? When she says she killed her, is it negative or whatever? So I like the days when I could say stuff like that and nobody paid attention at all. Now I gotta like defend myself. And you know, and I say it being funny, but really, there just comes a moment when after you've been faithful with a few, then you are blessed with the abundance of many. And I would encourage you to keep toiling, because it will come. It will definitely come. And when it comes, you need to be prepared. I say this, and it's the last thing, but I have to tell every young person that I know, the way in which the Women's March started has presented so many challenges and so much pain, because we took an elevator upstairs. So the other groups that I'm a part of, we've never experienced what the Women's March has been through in terms of being attacked and just all of the stuff that we've experienced, because we went up so fast. We didn't build we didn't build infrastructure. We just became this big entity to start. And that's a dangerous thing. Yep. So if you find yourself going too fast to the top, you know what you need to know is you're going to have to go back downstairs and walk up some of those steps all over again, because there is no quick way to success.
We are going to close this up. But first of all, round of applause, please, for all our panelists. The second thing is, and I'm going to close with this, and this is for literally every single person in this room, regardless of your age. You do not know you do not know where the person sitting next to you will be tomorrow. Now let me explain that. You do not know where they're going to be tomorrow. They might turn left and they might go down a bad path, or they might turn another way and they might end up being the CEO of a company. They might end up being the future funder of your social justice movement. They might be somebody who is going to put you on TV or radio. And so we must always understand that the relationships that we make today, how they actually manifest and how they actually work. When we were at the Million Man March 20th anniversary, all these people who were in Black Lives Matter, I've had all these people on the show, and I've had them on radio. And there were a lot of people who all had no cow, that's a phrase in Texas, meaning they all talk. And Tamika will tell you, when the march was over, it was Tamika, it was Carmen, it was Linda Sarsour, and I was interviewing all three of them. And Tamika just said something, I don't think you really, she said, you gotta be ready. I told the three of them, I said, I'm going to use all of my platforms to elevate all three of you as much as I can. I said, but listen, when I call, you better answer the damn phone. No. I need you to understand that. You can't say, I'm tired. Can I do it tomorrow? And I said, and if one of y'all can't do it, the other two better be ready. Why is that important? Because part of the elevation in terms of, oh, we know who you are, is because before ABC and Good Morning America and CBS called, they availed themselves to my platform and others. My ego is fine saying, I'll put y'all on, because what's the point of having a platform and, elevate people? I'm telling you, the biggest mistake that I have encountered as a person who's been in media since I was 14, that there are many people who want to be activists and leaders who want to do it on their own schedule, and when you call, they say, I'm busy. And I'm telling you, as a person who has run my own newsroom, I run 3 black newspapers, Lawn Media, if I call once and you blow it off, I might call a second time. But if I call a second time and you're still busy, I will never call again, and you miss your shot. And so when she said, be ready, you don't know when that moment hits. And if you're not ready, it passes you by, and there's no guarantee it's going to come back. And so, yeah, my son's going to go, yeah, he's like a preacher. He's like a preacher. You know how somebody they can sing and closes out with a song? And so my son's going to close us out. Okay.
I'm asking for elder privilege. I'm probably the oldest person in this room.
Well, there's elder privilege and younger privilege. So, but let's make it quick because we have to reward that reward.
Well, yes, sure. When April introduced herself, and she mentioned that she was part of 21st Century Youth Leadership Movement, and we brought about 40 young folks, mainly teenagers here. Most of them are right in this room. But I didn't hear too much that connected to them. But I salute you. I do, and I'm proud of the work that you're doing. But where are the rest of y'all? Because as an elder, with 5-year-olds, we started 21st Century in 1986. That was ages ago. And the folks, so now we're still working with teenagers. We start with them, we're trying their
you said where are the rest of y'all? Who?
I'm getting to that. That's my point. I'm going to tell you.
Okay, I know, but we got to make it quick. I'm asking, who's the rest of y'all?
This age group between the elders and the teenagers.
Well, no, here's how I'm allowing the privilege. Here's how I answer that. If y'all have been working with those folks since '86, where are the graduates?
Yeah, exactly.
So in your organization, how are you challenging them to go out and recruit?
I'm challenging all of us.
No. That's not.
I wish you would let me finish making my statement. We are working with these young folks, and one of the persons, trying to say something. He's one, Alfonso Morris, we started working with him when he was 10 years old, and now he and April are some of the young leaders, but we don't have enough, and we don't have enough. I don't know what it takes to keep them. And to keep them moving, to keep them active. So I'm saying, where are the rest of y'all?
Okay, but here's the deal. The organization you're speaking of, where are you based? So you said, where are y'all? If we don't, is it local? Is it state? Is it national?
Yeah, where is it? Where are you?
No, you have to give us details. You said, where are they?
I'm not just talking about, we were in Alabama. We're in the Black Belt of Alabama.
Okay, that's what the organization is.
Yes.
Right. So when you're asking, where are y'all? If most of us not from here, we can't answer that question.
No, because it's a national issue.
No, your organization is local. That's what I got. You asked
I'm saying that there is a gap nationally with elders who came up as young folks in the movement and are still trying to do the little bit they can. And then there's a younger group.
Because infrastructure, let me go historical present day. When you look at your historical organizations, SNCC was actually the organization you're speaking of. SNCC was the organization that was comprised of young folks. The organization that still, SNCC no longer exists. NAACP exists, Urban League exists, CORE is gone, and so the issue you're actually speaking of is infrastructure. You have to have infrastructure in order to pass something. The reality is, when you're no longer 15, and now you're 21, 22, 25, you actually graduate some other organization. And so the question then becomes, from your organization standpoint, what is your infrastructure and what is your age limit? Like, how old can you be? Are people graduating out? Where are they going? All of those questions go to it, and that's all I'm just asking. So, go ahead, Tamika.
I think what I'm also hearing you say is that you're looking for all of the young people in general, organization or not, that are doing the work. You want to know where are they and how are they being, I guess, nurtured, right, into this work. And what I would share with you is, I don't know if you're on social media or not. Maybe you are. Maybe y'all need to show her. There's a lot of them. They're all over. They were in Ferguson. They were in Baltimore. They're in New York.
There are many organizations.
I could sit here and say that, you know, the young people within the NAACP with Tiffany Lawson as the president. You know, it's amazing. Mary Pat Hector is a young person from Atlanta that has a lot of young people working. They are here. They are. It just doesn't necessarily look the same, but the young people are out there. But you are right. There is sort of like there's a struggle. There's a big tension with when you are in the social media age, and also with our music and other things becoming a little less culturally sensitive and conscious, put it that way. There is a disconnect. But I do think that what we're beginning to see with the Meek Mill movement in terms of him, you know, going to jail and having young people get behind that, and Colin Kaepernick and all of that, is a shift. There is beginning to be a shift where young people are starting to pipeline back into the movement. I see it.
But what you mentioned, all those groups you mentioned, they have infrastructure that's there. So when a young person transitions to a young adult and an adult, the next generation still has an organization there. One of the greatest struggles right now of many of the Black Lives Matter organizations is that they focus on activism and not infrastructure. And now, 3, 4, 5 years later, they're struggling because they went, dang, we ignored the infrastructure, and now they're struggling. How do we still maintain it? And so there are a number of organizations that are out there. I mean, I can tell you, Junior Knights of Junior Order of St. Peter Clay, the largest Black Catholic organization in the world. Those are all young people. I was a national officer in it. And so you graduate out of it. So they're there. They simply don't have the same national stature as an NAACP because they really aren't standalone entities. They're tied to other organizations. But they're actually there.
These conversations like this with intergenerational conversations, how do we connect to these young people? Because we have these young people sitting here who are a part of a generation also, but their heads are down. They're not being attentive to what you're saying because we are sitting up here with our conversation, but we're not connecting them to bring them along with the movement.
Y'all don't feel like these young folks that are on the panel are a part of that connection? Like, I just want to know technically what's missing.
I think there's good connection, but I always feel that there's a limitation to a panel structure in general. Like, I also have a connection to other organizations, and one of the biggest models is popular education, where like you sit in circles. So I think that panels can continue to go on in the future, but like I think that structurally we can also look at ways to come together where we, you know, go into small groups, have people from different generations in each group, and within that group, you're more likely to get more involvement with people across the generations because it's not really like a lot of people looking up at a panel of experts. Because that's one of the limitations of the panel structure. It's like, these are the people, and although we don't call ourselves the experts, just the physical makeup of it will lead to a divide, right?
And I'll ask the next question. From your organization standpoint, how many intergenerational conversations do you lead?
Oh, me personally?
No, your organization.
Okay, now we have had conversations. We have camps all of the time, but we connect with our young people. We have a winter camp.
No. What I said is, in your organization, how many intergenerational conversations where you are inviting elders and young folks and have the same dialogue we've been having? Do you do it as an organization?
Yeah. Well, yeah.
Good.
Because basically, we're built up of tiers of generations. You understand what I'm saying?
Right.
We all get together and have those conversations. However, I'm talking about in this setting, how can we have this conversation and connect with these young people?
I think that's a conversation.
And I'm glad that you stood to talk, because this young man sitting beside me recognized who
Exactly.
you were.
And that's why I do my job, because understand.
And he's going to close us out after this
I'm going to
with
say
spoken
this,
word.
close us out, but at the end of the day, that's what it has to be. Like, we have this saying called, nothing about us without us. So the youth, like I say this all the time, we go to these panels and it's not enough youth for me. Because that's who we're trying to connect. And that's what when I was talking to Fight, like, these are people, I follow Fight. Like, I'm a product of this civil rights movement. I'm a product of these older civil rights leaders. So when I utilize my voice and I utilize my platform and I add my own twist, don't push me away. Grab me and embrace me and find out what it is that I'm doing that's connected to these youth. All right, so I'm going to end it with this.
Right here, on the microphone.
On the microphone.
Yeah, so we can hear.
I need everybody to say, I don't have the right to do nothing.
I don't have the right to do nothing.
I sat and talked with a legend and I eagerly listened. No, I don't need you to
Don't tell us to repeat.
I just said repeat. I told you what I needed you to say. Okay, let's try it again. Y'all said, I don't have the right to do nothing. I don't have the right to do nothing. Now y'all have to talk. I sat and talked with a legend and I eagerly listened. He told me how he marched with Dr. King because he believed in his mission. He invested his money and his power to change our people's conditions. And all I could think, as I heard this man speak with conviction, is, I don't have the right to do nothing. Because Harry Belafonte sacrificed for people like me. So if he decided to do nothing, then where would I be? You see, if he was just content with a celebrity status, there wouldn't be a Justice League or Black Lives Matter. So I don't have the right to do nothing. Because we stand on the shoulders of our elders. We got to continue their fight against the system that failed us. Mr. B tells us, he drills in our mind, we got to carry this torch. You see, this is our time. Injustice is a crime, but it's about execution. And those directly impacted must be the solution. So I don't have the right to do nothing, because revolution is a part of evolution. And our forefathers weren't given no restitution. They were given destitution and treatment that's inhumane. So if we're part of the solution, how the hell we gonna complain? So I don't have the right to do nothing. I'm on a mission. I'm screaming until they listen. Dr. King died for freedom. I'm carrying on tradition. My people want justice. I'm carrying that petition. Police is out here killing us. We're going to need some more convictions. Peaceful and passive are not the same thing. Know the difference. You are not supposed to lay down and die with no resistance. So I don't have the right to do nothing. I don't have the right not to fight for my life. It's a gift from God. So with all of my might, I will protect my freedom, my family, my home. I know y'all gonna fight with me. Y'all ain't gonna leave me alone. So when my feet get weary and I can no longer sprint, I just think about the babies that's dying in Flint. And I say, I don't have the right to do nothing. God bless y'all. Good night.
All right. I got something to say. It's kind of like that. I'm not super lyrical. Let me tell y'all the truth about how I'm feeling. And nah, I ain't all in my feelings. I just want y'all to listen on how we live. Because he had a dream, but we failed to mission. So let's get back into it. Like I can just do it. I vent out my heart by using this music. And y'all are my people with amazing talent, but because of the lesson, we won't even use it. But see, we come out the bottom with too much of nothing. BAMA where it's hot in the oven. Apply a little pressure, it's getting a little stuffy, but we hard as raw, so to us it's nothing. Ancestors gave up a lot, so now in this world, you picking a spot to move to work, and just count up a knot so the cops come busting your spot. Or your homie switch up and leave you on the block for the key to the streets, but he picking the lock. And now my mama's crying because she wants it to stop because her baby's been put in a box. But this the beginning. Don't feel like they feel me. We need a little healing. Let's call to the spirit and ask for forgiveness, but the only way they gonna stop me, and they gonna have to kill me. Thank y'all.